In this last video, we're going to use some of these operators to write some practice programs. So we're going to write two text-based programs that interact with the user. The first is going to read the value from the user representing the number of hours, minutes, and seconds, and it's going to use that to calculate the total number of seconds. The second program is going to do the reverse. So it's going to read in the total number of seconds and print out the number of hours, minutes, and seconds. These two programs should be used as a model for your homework. They'll be very similar to the two programs I asked you to write to convert money. These will be very similar, but we're going to use time. So we're going to start with the first one where the user will enter in the number of hours, minutes, and seconds, and then we'll calculate the total number of seconds. So I'm going to switch over to Eclipse. I'm going to use the same project that I created in the previous set of videos, only I'm going to create a new class, and I will call it time conversion. And I'm going to interact with the user, so I'm going to want to include my main method. So what I want to do first is I want the user to enter in the number of hours, minutes, and seconds. So I'm going to give them a little message. And then the next thing I want them to do is enter the number of hours. And then I want them to read that value in. Now, previously, we used the scanner class to read in text from the user, but you can also use the scanner class to read in numbers from the user. So you do that using the nextInt method to read integers. So first what I need to do is create a scanner object, just like I've done before. And I want to read input from the keyboard, which is system.in. So my scanner object called scan gets a new scanner object reading from the keyboard. Now I see a little Eclipse error here, and the reason for that is because I have not imported the scanner class. So remember that to use the scanner class, you need to import it. And now when I save that addition, my error goes away. So the scan has, again, a nextLine method to read in text, and also a nextInt method to read in integer numbers. So I'm going to declare a variable, int hours, and actually I'll go ahead and declare three variables, hours, minutes, and seconds. And then I'm going to read the user entered value and store it in that variable. So hours is going to be scan.nextInt. So I'm reading in the number of hours, the user types in whatever they type in integer, and then I'm storing it in the variable hours. Right-hand side gets evaluated first. Whatever that value is, it gets stored in the variable on the left. And then I am going to tell the user enter the number of minutes. And I'm similarly going to store that into minutes. And enter the number of seconds. And I'm going to store that into seconds. Okay, so now I've got my three variables, the number of hours, the number of minutes, and the number of seconds, all read from the user. And I'm just going to reorganize this a little, so group things together a little bit better. Okay, so now what can I do? Well, I want to calculate the total number of seconds. So I'll probably want a variable to do that. So I'll declare another variable, total seconds. And how would I calculate that? Well, let's see. If the user entered in, let's say, no hours and no minutes and 5 seconds, the total seconds would just be 5. If the user entered in 1 minute and 5 seconds, then how many seconds would that be? Well, I would take 1 minute and multiply it by 60, because there's 60 seconds in a minute, and then I would add on the 5 seconds. So I would say something like total seconds is going to be equal to however many minutes that the user said, times 60, because there's 60 seconds in a minute, plus however many seconds the user said. So this would be like 1 minute times 60 seconds plus 5 seconds, for example. But remember I said whenever you find yourself entering numbers into your program, you want to think about whether that's a good place to use a constant. Well, is this a value that's going to change? Probably not. There's probably always going to be 60 seconds in a minute. So that means, okay, if it's a value that's not going to change, probably a good candidate for a constant. And also can we make this constant, if we named it properly, would that maybe be more clear to a user than just 60? Because here someone reading my code has to think about what the 60 means. But if instead of 60, if this said number of seconds in a minute, that's pretty clear to someone else reading my code. So I think it makes sense to use a constant here. So I'm going to declare that constant. Using my naming conventions, all caps, words separated by an underscore, and very long and descriptive. And I'm going to initialize that to 60. Now for right now, ignore these other keywords, the private and the static. We'll eventually talk about why we need those in our code, but for now you can just use them. Okay, so far so good. Now, what if the user had said they want 1 hour and 1 minute and 5 seconds? What do I do now? Well, I do the same thing. Previously, we multiplied minutes by number of seconds in a minute. Now I can do the same thing for hours, right? So I can say the total seconds we need to also add on. And to add something on, we can use what? We can use the assignment operator plus equals. So this is going to say, okay, take whatever number you calculated here, and now take that number and add something additional onto it. And what we're going to add additional is going to be hours times number of seconds in an hour. And then we need to also declare that constant, which there are, let's see, 60 times 60, there's 3,600, right? 3,600 seconds in an hour, 60 minutes in each second and 60 seconds in each minute and 60 minutes in an hour. So if we really want to make this a little bit clearer, we could start off by saying total seconds just gets the number of seconds that the user entered. And then we can use our assignment operator to say, okay, now add on the number of seconds associated with those minutes and the number of seconds associated with that number of hours. And then let's print it out to the user. Okay, so let's run this program. Let's start with the very simple 0 hours, 0 minutes, 5 seconds. Hey, that's 5 seconds. So far, so good. Let's say 0 hours, 1 minute, 5 seconds. Hey, that's 65 seconds. Pretty good. Let's say 1 hour, 1 minute, 5 seconds. 3,665. Also looking good. And we can make this as many hours and minutes and seconds as we want. So 17 hours, 24 minutes, and 13 seconds would be 62,653 seconds. Okay, so there we go. So that's the first practice. And this just shows you some examples of declaring variables, declaring and using constants, and then reading in numbers, integer numbers from the user, and outputting values to the user. So let's actually make a second class for our second practice. I'll call it time conversion reverse. And it's going to start out the same way. I'll still need a scanner object. And I'll still have to import the scanner class. Okay, so now I'm going to need a variable to read in. Now remember, we're reading in the total number of seconds from the user. Okay, so I'm going to tell the user, enter the total number of seconds. And I'll read that in as total seconds. And now what can I do? Well, now I need to think about how I can use my operators to break this down. So let's again think about a case where the user entered. Let's think about that one of those cases we just looked at in the previous example where they had 1 hour, 1 minute, and 5 seconds. So that was 3,665 seconds. Let's run that one again on our previous program. Right, 3,665 seconds. So if someone entered in the second program 3665, how can we use our operators to convert that into 1 hour, 1 minute, and 5 seconds? Well, can we use integer division and modulus to do this? There are different ways we can accomplish this, but let's think about how we can use our operators that Java gives us to do this. Well, if we want to think about the number of hours that there are, what we'd want to do is we'd want to see how many blocks of 3600 seconds are in the amount of time that the user entered. So we want to know how many full, complete sets of 3600 are in the total entered by the user. So to get the number of kind of full, whole number pieces of something, we can use integer division. And we're going to have some, we can take these same constants, I'm just going to copy and paste them over into this program, because these are still true, right? So what I can do is I can say, okay, I'm going to still need some more variables here for the number of seconds, minutes, and hours, since I'm going to be calculating that. And I can say, all right, well, the number of hours is going to be however many total seconds you gave me, integer division, so divided by the number of seconds in an hour. Right, so what this is going to say is if the user enters 3665, it's going to say, hey, what's 3665 divided by 3600? Well, it's 1 point something, something, something. But because these are both integers, we don't care about the point something, something, something. We just care about the 1. So that's going to give me a 1. Okay? So I can use integer division to get the number of kind of whole blocks of 3600 that are in there, and that's going to then tell me how many hours there are. Now, what about I want to now know how many minutes there are? Well, if I have full blocks of 3600 seconds, I've already accounted for those in the hours, right? So I don't want to say, okay, take 3665 and do integer division with 60, the number of seconds in a minute, because that's going to give me way too many, right? That's going to give me 61. But I've already accounted for those 60 previously. So what I need to do is I need to kind of get rid of all of those blocks of 3600 and find out what's left over. Well, when you think about what's left over, what comes to mind? Hopefully modulus. So what I can do is I can say, okay, let's take total seconds and let's update it, taking the modulus of number of seconds in an hour. So basically what I'm doing here is I'm saying, okay, 3665, now take the remainder after you integer divide by 3600. And in our case, that's going to be 65. So this is kind of saying, get rid of, again, all those whole blocks of 3600, and then just give me what's left over. And we could even streamline this line a little bit more, because remember, we can use modulus equals, so we could also say total seconds modulus equals number of seconds in an hour. So either one of those two lines would be appropriate. Okay, so now I've kind of gotten rid of all those seconds that are already accounted for by the number of hours, and now I need to do the same thing with the number of minutes. So minutes is going to be the total seconds. This is now my updated value divided by number of seconds in a minute. So in our case, total seconds is 65, and we're now going to take 65 and divide it integer division by 60, which 65 divided by 60 is 1 point blah, 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 but I don't care about the blah, blah, blah. I just care about the 1 because I'm performing integer division. So that's just going to give me a 1. And then I, again, want to kind of find out what's left over to find out how many seconds I have left. So I can, again, say total seconds gets total seconds mod number of seconds in a minute. And then the seconds that I have left over are just going to be whatever is left. And I'll print that out to the user. Okay, so let's run this, and let's start with our simple example of 3665. Hey, that's 1 hours, 1 minutes, and 5 seconds. So not great grammar, but good calculation. And let's go back into our first program and run one of those more complicated ones. 17 hours, 24 minutes, 13 seconds was 62653. And if we run the reverse, putting in 62653, we should get 17 hours, 24 minutes, and 13 seconds. So this second example shows you how you can sometimes use integer division to your advantage. You often need to think about how to get around it by doing things like multiplying by 1.0, but sometimes you can use it, and this is one of those cases. It also shows you another use for modulus, and this is again an example of just reading numeric input from the user and outputting values to the user. Again, you can use these programs as a model when completing your homework. You'll be doing something very similar, but using money instead of time. So if you have any questions about how these two example programs work, please post those to the forum.